Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Lunch and Learn. I'm Lauren Smith with the International Franchise Association, and we have a great 30 minutes lined up for you. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone that we are recording today's webinar and will make it available later this evening on community.franchise.org. If you have any questions for today's speakers, please add them to the Q&A box and they will be addressed toward the end. Today's topic is 1% Better with ProfitKeeper, and it is brought to us by ProfitKeeper. Here to provide today's discussion is Kyle McEuen, Senior Vice President of Franchise Services at ProfitKeeper. Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you to ProfitKeeper for sponsoring today's Lunch and Learn. I'll go ahead and turn things over to you.
Yeah, thanks everybody. It's a privilege to be here with everybody. We absolutely know that days are busy, and it says a lot about everyone to take a little bit of time and to try and learn and get better and be more effective in their roles and help their brands, etc. So really grateful that everybody's here, and we hope that this is a benefit and a value to everybody for more effective thinking and action and maybe some nuggets that you can get from the approximately 25 to 30 minutes that we'll be here today. I wanted to first introduce Lule Melo. Also works for ProfitKeeper. She's going to be kind of monitoring any questions that anybody has. We certainly can answer questions at the end, but just in case anybody has a relevant question, we are definitely open to being casual about this and kind of stopping as it pertains to maybe something that we talked about as we go through this. But okay, so I am excited about this. You're getting me from a hotel room at the Restaurant Finance and Development Conference, where later today I'm on a panel for four-wall profitability. I'm absolutely passionate about this subject, and let me give you a little background on where it was born from. So in my role at ProfitKeeper, I'd say over 18 years, I've had many discussions with extremely talented franchise leaders in their brands, operations leaders, finance leaders, all kind of leading to this kind of effort to help the franchisees make money, why they got into their business, but ultimately to increase that unit level economics, both for them and their and the brand. And so as I've been through this journey in franchising, I've noticed and observed in a lot of different things. And then about a month ago, we were in the UK for some brands that we do business with over there, and we were giving a presentation. And I had kind of delved into this subject before. It had been presented to me. I know it's in the book Atomic Habits, but I had presented this in relation to franchisees' performance and not getting overwhelmed with trying to change their business all at once, and actually measuring things to try and intentionally do this. And you never know after a presentation. I thought it went fairly well, but afterwards I was speaking with the brand leaders and the president, and they said, Kyle, for whatever reason, that really connected with franchisees. It was very palatable. It seemed like that's what everybody's talking about after the convention, was this be 1% better. So that's kind of where this concept was born, and that we're going to share with you today. As it pertains to the relationship with ProfitKeeper, obviously we're a software company that we do benchmarking analytics and trends for a lot of partners and those in the franchise industry. So we'll use some examples there, but conceptually, that's kind of where we're going to drive today's topic. Okay, the first thing that I want to talk about is inherently, and if you don't know this, I think it's fairly public now. I run a franchise location with my wife. She actually does it. I help wherever I can, but she's pretty amazing that way. And we run a Primrose school. So some of this is also born from just real life kind of experience on now in that, like we're on that side of things, and how we kind of experienced our financials and our performance and how that pertains to working with our franchisor. But when we work with franchisees, obviously we're getting it to a point where we're already getting financials and we're in conversations with us, but it became like apparent to us over time that many franchisees are busy, and rightly so. And I talk about busy feels good, but many times busy is bad because busy keeps them from being like strategic about their business. So I use this example in Alice in Wonderland many times with franchisees where Alice says, would you tell me which way I ought to go? And the Cheshire Cat says, well, that depends a good deal on where you want to get. And Alice says, I don't care much where. And then the cat says, well, then it doesn't matter which way you go. So from a strategy perspective, the strategy is secondary to the ambition of the franchisee. And the ambition, at least how I've always hold it, is I hold my role of profit keeper and my responsibilities in my franchise to take care of my family first and foremost. And franchisees take a lot of debt and risk, and certainly they want to make money. And now it certainly can be a passion for them and what they want to do and what they like to do. But ultimately, they got into business to make money. And so we always draw it back to one of the key ambitions of every franchisee that we want to remind them is you got into the business to make money. And so then we need to start designing strategies from there and paying attention to where we're going. And this is also key background. I think every time I go to franchisees, and I've like taken a step back on the coaching for franchisors, is we talk about fantasy and possibility and opportunity as it relates to financials. And fantasy is like, okay, that's great that you want to make $50 million this year. Probably like there's no real story of how that can be accomplished. So we're going to put that in the fantasy category, right? And then as we talk about financials, like, hey, there's a possibility. There's probably at least one reason, like we have a story for at least one reason how that could happen. But to make that happen, there's certain strategies that need to be employed to be able to accomplish that. And then there's real opportunities, which means there's real structures in place to accomplish that. Like we've got financial capital, we've got human capital, we've got all of it designed so that we can say that's a true opportunity to accomplish that. So the background to the financial aspect and benchmarking analytics and where we want to go to improve is all kind of oriented with a background of, is it a fantasy? Is it a possibility? Or is it actually an opportunity? And then we're going to leverage the financials and information for that. I get this quite often. I know that, reality of doing this over 18 years is that we have many conversations with franchisors and we empathize to all of them because we see the real effects of their decisions and their help. But we know that a lot of franchisors, like maybe it's required in the FDD to get financial information to kind of help their franchisees. But ultimately, that's maybe a tough decision on whether to like actually require that and put something behind that or to make that optional. And so that background is, ultimately what we're trying to help franchisors and franchisees for that matter understand is that when you get your financials and when you roll that up to a place that you can benchmark that against their peers, it truly does open up a new space of possibilities for the franchisees to increase profit. I have a firm belief in this because I've seen too many examples throughout the years to kind of say otherwise, because what I know is that franchisees, when they're working hard, when they don't have benchmarking, it really is like I'm looking at my financials and I'm looking at a number. Let's take labor, let's take cost of goods sold. And if someone were to ask them, is that percentage of sales or is that number, is that good or is that bad? And typically what they'd say is that is good or bad based on last month, based on last year, which makes sense. That's what they have at their disposal to measure their performance. It's their own performance. When you put a benchmark out there and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Franchisee, like, did you know that based on everybody in the Phoenix metropolitan area that's been in business longer than 2 years, like yourself, that you are spending 10% more on your labor than everybody else? And all of a sudden it's like, oh, I had no idea. Like, oh, I'm spending that much more on labor. And inherently what that means is that there's an opportunity. There's something I haven't learned. There's a knowledge gap that is a possibility for me to learn something to be more efficient, to make more money. So that's why I call it opening a new space of possibilities for franchisees. And then we've seen time and time again, using your peers' numbers does make you better, especially if you can kind of get relevant peer groups and design that. So whether it's like revenue tiers, whether it's like regions or whatever it is, but like really meaningful, relevant peer groups, that certainly makes you better. And then finally, there's definite tiers of franchisees. We understand there's really sophisticated multi-unit franchisees that high business acumen, are really talented, but then a lot of franchisees leverage their retirement funds, didn't necessarily have a finance background, and so the financial world is just a bit uncomfortable to them. Like they'll read a financial and they'll read the numbers, but what does that mean? Like, what does that number mean? What action should they be in if they see it? And so there's just this reality that there's tools that are needed to help the franchisees be more effective operators. I was sitting a couple years ago in the multi-unit conference, I think, and there's some really successful multi-unit operators. And this is not my quote. We've heard it time and time again, but they mentioned it. They said, listen, we know if you're not intentionally looking at your financials and some of this information on a regular basis, you're absolutely leaving money on the table. So I would imagine that a lot of you in the audience believe all of this. And so now it's time to talk about, tactics and strategies and maybe possibilities of how we can do this and kind of leverage this within our brands and with franchisees. This is then my background to the 1%. So again, many of you might know this story. By the way, it was very, very interesting to be in the UK and realize that a lot of the franchisees of the franchisor knew this very, very intimately. They knew all of the details, and it was kind of fun to have a back and forth with them on this story. But basically, the background of the British cycling team is that for over 100 years, they were just inept, extremely bad, very limited, if any, success at all. In fact, it got so bad that the bike manufacturers that they didn't want the British cycling team to use their bikes because they feel like that would lessen the value of their brand, of their bike brand, because the British cycling team was that bad. And so they just had this history, like it wasn't ever something that they were good at. Then they brought in a coach, and this coach had a philosophy. And rather than kind of trying to change everything overnight, which a lot of leaders want to do, like we want to move mountains, we want to move. And instead, he took a different approach, and he took the philosophy of 1% better. So 1% better meant for the British cycling team, like we were going to like analyze every part of the business, and we are going to try and intentionally get 1% better in the way that we eat, in the way that we train, in the way that we maintain the bikes, in the way that we travel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they kind of document this. Pretty fascinating if you guys want to read about this. But what happens is if you can get 1% better basically each day, and I'm not a mathematician, they gave me this math, but you'll be 37 times better by the end of the year. What we are proposing at ProfitKeeper is the 1% better every month also materially impacts your bottom line if you can have a strategy for that to intentionally look at your financials and benchmarks and analytics once a month. But the results of this were just fascinating. And it's relatively new if you think about it, like when they came in to do this. But 5 years later, after that he got hired, they dominated the Beijing Olympics, won 60% of the medals. London Olympics, they won 9 Olympic records. And this is a team that never had any success before this. At Rio, 2/3 of the Olympic gold medals went to them. 2012, they won the Tour de France. They had never won the Tour de France before, and just et cetera, et cetera. I mean, just take a look at those accomplishments, and it's powerful. I mean, there is incredible cyclists around the world and cycling teams. And you took someone that never had any success, and then they just took a step back and they changed their thinking. And from that thinking, they took action and they created some pretty incredible results. And what we're trying to say is it is no different with franchisees and their performance as it relates to then the financials and their success with their bottom line. Okay. So how does that happen? And I'm gonna have some screenshots and in the next 5 to 10 minutes, we'll go over some examples. But typically when we go into a franchise, there's some key things that we kind of see that lead to success in this pattern. And the first is I've seen various things like franchisors sometimes require like, hey, for the first year or two, you can't we're going to require you to outsource your books because we want you focusing on the operations. We want your books accurate. And so, you got to do like, there's a structure for that, right? Other franchisors, preferred vendors that are trusted, that can do the books. We know some franchisees don't mind doing their books and they're good at it. Maybe they have a finance background. But ultimately, like the way that we get those financials, and ProfitKeeper can sync it up, or we can upload files or whatever we want to do there. But like the importance of getting those financials in a place that are good to then roll up is actually pretty important. ProfitKeeper actually has a unique validation tool that we can work with you as the franchisor to say, here's the criteria that we want you to flag or reject or whatever once the financials are synced, because we feel at ProfitKeeper, probably our finance accounting background that we have, that it's really important if you're going to make decisions on this data that you fundamentally understand like how it was got to us, how it was validated, so you have confidence in the benchmarking. But there are many great vendors out there that kind of help with that. So that's one kind of thought, is leverage that like crazy if you can, to help your franchisees. A personal story for me is that my wife has all the stress of running this school with 200 kids, and she's just doing a great job, and I'm trying to jump in when I can at night and help the financials and do different things. And it was a pretty funny conversation because I have an accounting degree. I was in public accounting before I came to ProfitKeeper, and here I am saying, like telling my wife, like, I've got the financials, no big deal. It's what I do. It's easy. And month after month, my wife is asking me, "Hey, the financials done yet?" And I'm like, "I'm really busy at ProfitKeeper. I really haven't been able to do that yet." And kind of the frustration that occurred as a result of that interaction was like I wasn't getting it done. So we really tell the franchisees, I know you want to save money a lot of times, but really truly just consider like the opportunity cost that's being lost, that you can spend on other things if you get a partner to help you with those financials, right? So anyways, that being said, when it's synced up into a tool like ProfitKeeper, then the key thing that we want to do is make it really, really easy and useful to see the data. And I'm going to talk about making assessments in just a little bit, because one of the things that ProfitKeeper does is we make data assertions. Like that's what we do so that assessments can be made by the individual franchisee to employ the 1% better. But there's also partners that can help you with that. And we'll talk about that in a second. But going back to the way we do it at ProfitKeeper, we feel very strongly that franchisees have a ton of reports everywhere. They have POS reports, they have financial reports. There's reports floating around everywhere. We've always felt strongly that the visual really helps a franchisee, makes them make quick assessments. So in our software, we kind of like do quick trends. Is there a negative trend? Is there a positive trend represented by green or red? In our dials, we statistically let them know, where they're ranking within that chosen peer group. Once again, they might think that a national average is not very valuable to them, but boy, that state average, that's really valuable to them. So we let them assess themselves against those peer groups. And so many times franchisees, they might get a little scared to see this, especially if they're not performing well. We just try to be like super positive with them in our trainings and say, guys, or I say guys, in general, but like all that's telling you is that your peers have something figured out, or there's an opportunity for you to increase your like knowledge gap to be more efficient. So let's leverage partners. Let's leverage the brand to get a strategy and to focus on that this month, that 1% better. And again, I've seen so many great brands do this well, but I got to speak to operations here, because operationally, there are great franchise business coaches that do a really good job on like quality checks, and they're checking for like the mechanics of the operations, and they talk about sales, all these good things. But what we have kind of seen and observed at ProfitKeeper is there isn't always a structure within the brand for the franchise business coach to have a meaningful, well-grounded discussion in financials. And I know it's probably not the best analogy, but again, I'm using my own analogies. Like, it's pretty powerful when someone comes into, like, let's say our school, and we're talking about a classroom and it needs to be structured like this. like to me, that's operations. Like, got it. There's state requirements. We got to do that. But what's even more powerful is to say, okay, if you were to organize it this way, you could get one more child in your classroom. That equals this much per week. That equals this much per year. That equals this much. That's pretty powerful. And I'm telling you, you'll get the franchisees' attention. So that's personal experience, but that's talking to many, many different franchisees. They want that kind of guidance. They want that kind of help. I realize some franchisees think that they know it all. I'm talking about the majority of franchisees. They are open to that help as franchisees. So as a franchisor, is there a structure in place that you have to use easy to view data that you can like show a franchisee and have a really good conversation on? So in ProfitKeeper, what I'm showing you right now is we do like visual trends over a year. So you can see, for example, with your labor in the blue, okay, this is me for my location. My average that I've chosen, once again, that's most meaningful to me, is the orange. And if there's any real like delta changes, differences, boy, that's something that's really helpful for a franchisor and a business coach that has a lot of experience to jump in and say, Kyle and Kate McEuen, I was noticing that last month, like you're really out of line with the average. Let's just talk about that just for a second. Do you feel like if there was anything potentially misclassified, or if not, here's what some other franchisees are experiencing. Here's some best practices, some tips, etc. And like I said, I know the franchisees would be super open to that. In our software too, we also like a franchisor benchmark because we want the franchisors to say, regardless of where their average is, regardless of whether you're performing, our collective experience here is that if you operate within this area, that you can, be successful. And so we want you to visually see that to try and match that every month. So that's kind of important too. We'll show, I talk about the busy is bad. If anybody knows me, I talk about that a lot. Busy feels good, but a lot of times it means you're not being strategic about your business. Our software tries to aid a little bit of that with franchisees, tell them where on average they're spending more than their peers. So that way, when they set up their strategy, and think about it this way, every GL account can be its own strategy. Like if I wanted to look at labor 1 month, we're now putting in a strategy to say, how can we maximize labor efficiency? How can we maximize cost of goods sold if we're a restaurant? There's probably 10 different tactics we can take that month to look, to do, and then to take a step back and to assess, was that effective? What result or what effect did that have on my business? So I call that, it's a strategy per GL account, right? But again, it's way more effective if you have that peer benchmarking to give context on where you stand. Sometimes it's as simple as, you're going crazy as a franchisee saying, is this normal? And then you see your peer data and you're like, oh, good. Okay. I'm not too far off the path here. And that's sometimes just as beneficial to have that kind of settling feeling. Just for the purpose of time, I'm going to go through a few more of these, but basically our software visualizes each GL account so you can actually see that. So you can, instead of looking at a report, you're visually seeing, okay, blue, that's me. Orange, once again, is the average 12 months, month by month, quarters, whatever it is, and then down to like that chosen peer group. So that way I can say I can't move mountains in 1 month, but I'm just going to take the one that I see maybe is the most material, and I'm going to attack that. I'm going to strategize over that. I'm going to work on that, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to see that with my management team, with my directors, with whatever, to see how well that worked. We do have also a tool called financial forecasting. I love forecasting because there's never a conversation that like my wife and I are having at night that doesn't involve, well, what if we could like fill up this or rearrange this classroom and make this age to this age and et cetera, et cetera. And what would that mean to our business? And we're always kind of thinking through that. And I know all franchisees are like that. So in our tool, we give a forecasting tool, really simple, where you can say, here's what I'm doing. And if I was to increase sales by X, if I was to renegotiate this vendor, if I was to get more efficient in this place as a percentage of sales or dollar amount, I could produce Y. So I get that comparison. And what that does is, again, with those franchise business coaches, that's a really exciting conversation sometimes, because you get a franchisee and those ups and downs and they're kind of like depressed or maybe beaten down a little bit. And all of a sudden a really good business coach says, hey, we get it, but if you're able to do this, which is pretty realistic, look what effect that would have on your business. And that's just tremendously helpful to a franchisee. So in summary, we'll end on time, and we'll like leave 5 or so minutes. If anybody has any questions, Lule can let me know as well. But in summary, franchisees, we talk about ambition. We have to remind them they got into business to make money. So if they get busy and they feel overwhelmed, they still need to remember they got into business to make money. So what activities can we be in? If we're not looking at our financials, we're not helping our ambition. It's a little bit like Alice in Wonderland. We're like, where do we go? Well, it doesn't matter because you don't have it, like you haven't quantified what you want to do. So it doesn't matter what strategy you're in. Like it's all about making money, increasing your bottom line. Be intentional about dedicating time to review. Love the things that I've seen some franchisors weekly call or like monthly check-ins, quarterly, more detailed check-ins, whatever you guys do, have a structure for that. And then know that, again, don't shy away from it. Franchisees need it. Even if they don't want it, they need it. And then finally, leverage that operations team. So many times, like tools like ProfitKeeper can be seen as like a finance tool, but really in the hands of operations is extremely powerful. One last thing I'll put in there is there are tremendous partners within the franchise system. I'll name Profit Soup is one of them. Barb, love Barb. She does such a great job on the educating part. So ProfitKeeper makes the assessments so you can see and design and where you want to go. But sometimes if you need help really understanding what it's saying, like Profit Soup and others are out there, they do a great job at kind of educating on that too as a supplement. So anyways, thank you everybody. That's kind of all that I have. Lule, do we have any questions at all?
Yes, we actually do. We have a question from Brooke Patter. She said, hi, might be something to discuss at the end, but how have you applied these concepts of getting 1% better in your own franchise, Primrose Schools? Thanks so much.
Yeah, I think I'll try to be efficient with time, but that is a fantastic question. So I'm going to reiterate because some of this came from me. So with my wife and I, we have intentional conversations and they're grounded in data and they're grounded then in we get comparative data as well. So it's like a leveled, it's kind of like a practice where we have to look at financials. We first look at see where we are, like how did we perform compared to last month, or what I would say as typical for us. Once we do that, we measure against the peers, and we always want to know where we're at in relation to our peers. And then we isolate 1 or 2 things that month that we're going to intentionally work on. And when we do that, we have the full intent of not moving the mountains. We're not going to move the whole kind of the whole thing at once. We're just going to focus on that one thing, and we're going to try and make that better. And that's where that 1% comes in. So for us, that's easy, that's palatable, it's not complicated, and it's very doable. And that's how I speak it to franchisees, because that's my experience. And we have found, like, we have so many cool examples of cleaning costs that we did that with, thousands of dollars every month that we applied that to. We give 5 meals a day for the children. And there was a whole process around designing around that to say, we're spending more. What does that mean? We don't know. We haven't been food operators before. We run a school. So there was education that had to be done. And we just tried to get our 1% better. Now we're doing really well in that. So again, to me, you have to lay it out and not make it complicated. Isolate 1 or 2 things, really just intentionally try to work on that for your 1% better. And then I think that you'll see really good outcomes. Oh, and then leverage your peers and coaches if you have questions on how to do that, because they can offer some pretty incredible insight.
Thank you.
Any other questions at all?
Let's see. Barb, just a comment. I love the forecast function. That's new to me, and I love the percentage which ties to break even plus thinking. And thanks for the mention of Profit Soup. Information, education, tools, the 3-legged stool of improvements.
Absolutely. Good financials, well-grounded, validate the financials to go into ProfitKeeper. And then based on your assessments and what you want to, like what tactics you want to be in to improve, leverage those tools like the education and everything else. But guys, we're right at 10:30. We want to be respectful of time. And we'll end. Thank you so much. We hope you got a few good ideas to work on, but appreciate being with everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kyle. This was excellent content and excellent feedback from all of you. We really do appreciate it. Again, this webinar was recorded, and along with the presentation deck will appear on our website early this evening. You'll be able to find that at community.franchise.org. Thank you very much again to our speakers and the ProfitKeeper team. And again, thank you to everyone for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day and stay safe and healthy. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.